Warning, the following program contains scenes of death.
Tell me what happened last Saturday.
From the beginning?
Yeah.
I was talking to Grace on Tinder.
Yeah.
We'd matched on Friday. I saw that we'd matched the next day on Saturday. And then we met at Sky City, and then we decided that we were going up to Andy's Burger Bar, which is on the first floor.
Whose idea was it to go to that particular burger place?
Me, because I didn't initially know that she was real.
What do you mean?
Well, there's a lot of... So have you heard of catfish?
No.
So catfishing is where someone uses your profile, or uses your photos and pretends to be you, and then meets, and you're a completely different person.
Right.
And it's on Tinder, it's all about the way you look. And so if they use more endearing photos, you're more likely to swipe for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does meeting in a public place sort of protect you from meeting someone who's not as good looking as...
Well, there's security there. So if she wasn't who she said she was, at least in my mind, I'd feel safe.
22-year-old Grace Mallane had just graduated and gone to Auckland, New Zealand for the beginning of her gap year. A gap year is a ritual for UK students graduating, and it's their transition into becoming an adult. And although Grace's parents were worried about their daughter traveling the world alone, they knew the baby bird had to leave the nest sometime. Grace arrived in Auckland on November 30th. And on December 1st, she arranged to meet a man that she'd hooked up with on Tinder, a dating app. After an evening of heavy drinking, she was caught on security cameras going back to his hotel. And that was the last time she was seen alive.
So they use strategies. They use their minds. They use sex. They totally learn to humiliate.
On December 2nd, Grace Mallane's 23rd birthday, when she didn't respond from text messages from family and friends wishing her happy birthday, and her mobile appeared to be turned off, there were concerns, as it was out of character for the young woman. But little did anyone know, Grace was dead. She'd been murdered shortly after midnight. Her nude body folded up, packed away in a suitcase, gone on a trip that she was never coming back from. And the man, whose identity is now protected under New Zealand's laws, could be seen the next morning going into a store and buying a telltale suitcase, followed by the obligatory cleaning products. And then, still before lunch, he rents a small hatchback and drives 40 minutes outside the city limits, stopping only once to buy a shovel, with his final destination, Auckland's National Park. Returning to his hotel around 1 p.m., showering, the chubby-thighed Tinder Lothario, who told women he was an oil executive, slapped on some cologne and went on another Tinder date, keeping in mind he'd only buried his last date 2 hours earlier. In his Tinder preferences, he listed bondage as how he'd like to get off, as did Grace and his other hookups, also listing strangulation during sex as a turn-on.
I saw that she was lying on the floor. I saw that she had blood coming from her nose. I screamed, I yelled out at her, and I tried to move her to see if she was awake.
When the teen's parents phoned the hotel that she was staying at, they found out that she had not returned that night or the next day. And although the police went to the hotel as per the parents' request, they contacted the parents and said there were no signs of foul play. Both of Grace's parents were now on a flight from England to New Zealand.
I didn't believe what had happened. I was just terrified and scared.
Neck kind of basically extended from the jaw down. You look at your own neck, there's a very broad band of muscle which comes down the side of your neck called sternomastoid muscle. So the bruising was to the midline of that, or just over more towards the right. There has been sufficient pressure in that place for a sufficient period of time and for sufficient force for that bruising to occur.
Did you kill Grace Mallane? Okay. You're under arrest for the murder of Grace Mallane on or about the 2nd of December.
Everybody in this world has got a secret, and if they say they don't, then they're a liar. And Grace Mallane, although a sweet, popular young lady, she was no different. And by all accounts, she liked the rough stuff, to be smacked around a bit, and the tighter the hands around her neck, the harder she'd come, and she liked to stand on the knife's edge. But that was no reason for the young woman to die. And I guess we'll never know what happened in that hotel room that night, except for Grace and the mystery man with the chubby thighs.
In the most brutal fashion a year ago, and our lives and family have been ripped apart. This will be with us for the rest of our lives. Grace was a beautiful, talented, loving daughter. Grace was our sunshine, and she will be missed forever. She did not deserve to be murdered in such a barbaric way.
We kept talking about life, we kept talking about other people. Most of the time we were sitting there, we were just kissing.
Later that evening, he left his hotel room with 2 suitcases on a trolley. One of them contained Grace Mallane's naked body, forced into a fetal position. The next morning, he buried the body in woodland just outside Auckland city centre.
Understanding is that you're going to be potentially in a position to go and show us where Grace is. Is that correct?
Day he got up early and headed to West Auckland, where he bought a shovel at a hardware store.
Were 2 roughly circular areas of probable blood staining between the bed and the utilities alcove and wardrobe.
And all the time I just kept saying, I'm sorry.
Wouldn't it be great if in life we had one undo where we could go back on a mistake and fix it? There was an ancient egghead philosopher who once said that in this life there are winners and there are losers. Case in point, 18-year-old Michelle Martinko was clearly a winner. You know the type, whose pussy tastes like cherry pie and everybody wants a slice. I want whipped cream on mine, but Michelle's cherry pie is for the preferred clientele, and the general male population is not invited to partake. You know the score. Now, by all accounts, Michelle wasn't very popular with the other female student body. I guess on account of that her student body was that much better of a student body. Shazam. But she had a lot of suitors. Married men, teachers. Now, I'm guessing anyone who could get a boner. It was on Wednesday that Michelle attended her school choir. Before breaking for Christmas, afterwards, she was going to a new mall that had just opened to buy a new jacket. She'd asked a friend, but the friend declined. And I'm guessing that was the last time she asked, and the last time that someone declined. And she went to the mall all by her lonesome. And Michelle's death clock was now ticking. A pretty young teen who'd recently got a job at the mall was seen talking to some of her co-workers. Coroners reported she had a full stomach, so she most likely ate at the food court. And her father called the police when she didn't come home by 2 a.m. It was 2 hours later, 4 a.m., that a cop found her body in a parked car just outside of JCPenney's. She was stabbed 29 times, most of them in the face. Her body was found trying to climb into the back seat, and she still had in her possession the $180 that she left with to buy a jacket. Cops figured whoever did it, it was personal, and they knew Michelle, and they knew her well, but she gave as good as she got. She fought hard for her life. Okay, maybe she fell short, and the rumor mill at her school were rampant. A married teacher, she was pregnant. Pissed off girlfriends, teachers' wives. After all, a quarter of the female population at the school hated her guts. She had most of the boys in the school wrapped around her finger. So it wasn't who did it, it was who wouldn't want to do it. Even that night at the mall, someone witnessed her getting into an argument with an ex-boyfriend. And although forensics believe she was murdered between 10 and 11, a woman who'd come to the mall to retrieve her daughter's purse that she'd left in a broken-down car swears that she saw Michelle at 2 a.m. with a car pulled next to hers, and she was talking to a well-dressed businessman. Police believe the fact there were no fingerprints, that the killer was wearing gloves. Yeah, it was premeditated. Perhaps he wanted some of her pie, but she told him no. They also figure that the killer had cut himself during the attack, explaining his blood in the car and on her dress. But either way, by the mid-'80s, the case had gone cold. Michelle's parents died in the early 90s without ever knowing what happened to their daughter, with only her older sister left to keep her memory alive, campaigning for justice. It was in 2006, and a detective going through some old cold cases ran a DNA check on the blood found on Michelle's dress, but nothing came up on their database for previous arrests. But the detective had a hard-on for the case, and he figured that Michelle deserved that he used that hard-on her and her memory. So only 2 months before his retirement, he hired a new technology company who took the killer's blood sample off the dress and put together a DNA profile, even what the scumbag looked like. And although many of the principal players had now moved on or died, but as mentioned, The detective had a boner for the case, and he kept poking around with that boner. And after being shown the computer-generated DNA fit, co-workers remembered a loser at the time who had been semi-stalking Michelle. And although the pretty young teen thought that her dorky stalker was harmless and laughed off people's concerns, co-workers felt that she was courting disaster and were uncomfortable in the creep's presence, but at the same time knew that was how Michelle got her buzz. But the detective had a hard-on for the dog, so he started tailing him. While observing his hunch eating his lunch, he dropped a drinking straw, and the detective scooped it up and had it tested. And bingo!
We can close this case, this tragic case. It's been haunting this community for 39 years.
And after almost 4 decades, you can kind of see how Burns figured he'd gotten away with it. Detectives picked him up at his work, where he ran a small business with his son, 40 minutes from where Michelle was murdered. Arrested on the anniversary of the day that Michelle was killed. He didn't even deny it. He just told the cops, "Show me the proof." And he also said that he had no idea how his blood got on her dress. You'd think with 4 decades he'd be able to come up with some excuse, and it was his lack of knowledge of prevailing technologies and Burns' sheer arrogance that was his downfall. Because it seemed that Jerry Burns had tried to line up and be one of the lucky ones to fuck Michelle Martinko, and he figured that he could jump the lineup and take what wasn't his. But in the end, it was a detective with a hard-on who, with the help of Michelle Martinko from beyond the grave, that ended up fucking Jerry Burns.
Legion forever!
That book says no more.